Ronan Cade wiped his oil-stained hands on a rag that had seen better days. The workshop smelled of scorched metal and old circuits. Outside, the desert wind howled across the rusted metal roofs of Virelia's outskirts, throwing sand through every crack and crevice. The city beyond the dunes looked alive, but out here, it was just him, the machines, and the quiet that pressed down like a weight. Once he had worked on ships that touched the stars. Now he fixed scavenged hovercrafts for drifters who had nothing to pay him with but gratitude, and sometimes a glare. He was about to close for the night when a sound made him freeze. It was faint, almost like a whimper, but it carried through the wind. Ronan frowned. Nothing should be out here at this hour. Not people, not animals, nothing. The sandstorm was growing stronger and visibility was almost zero. He could have ignored it. Most would. But something inside him, some part he thought had died long ago, made him step outside. Through the whipping sand he saw it, a small dark shape tumbling across the dunes. At first he thought it was debris from the storm. Then it moved. A hatchling no bigger than a human child, scrambled against the wind. Its scales glinted faintly silver and blue, and its eyes, wide, terrified, shining, locked on him. Ronan's heart thumped. He had heard stories of alien creatures surviving in the desert, but he had never seen one. Not up close. The hatchling's wing was bent, its breathing ragged, its body trembling with cold. It looked lost, alone, and frightened. Ronan felt a tug in his chest, a surge of protectiveness he hadn't felt since, he didn't even know. He grabbed a tarp from the workshop and ran, the sand stinging his face, until he could scoop the creature up. Its tiny claws dug into his jacket, and it let out a shrill cry that made his teeth clench. "It's okay," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if it could understand. "I won't let anyone hurt you." Inside the workshop, the warmth of the small space made the hatchling hiss and twitch, retreating to a corner. Ronan placed it gently on a pile of cloths and tried to assess the damage. Its wing was twisted, scales scorched, and it shivered like it might break apart. He didn't know what kind of creature it was, dragon, alien, some hybrid, but he knew one thing. If he didn't act, it would die. The problem was simple and terrifying. He had no resources, no food designed for something like this, no medical knowledge of alien biology. Everything he knew was human. And yet he could not walk away. He began tearing apart old machines, heating metal carefully to make splints, using rags to make a crude sling for the wing. The hatchling hissed at every touch, spitting fire sparks that sizzled against the metal table. Ronan flinched once but then steadied himself. Fear would not help them. Precision would. Determination would. Hours passed. The storm outside grew louder. His hands shook from fatigue, but he worked tirelessly. He found small nutrient gels in his supplies, meant for long desert crossings, and fed the hatchling tiny amounts, watching it sip like a child. Its breathing slowed, its eyes less frantic. And yet, every few minutes, it would twitch violently, as if remembering some danger that Ronan could not see. The hatchling was not just injured, it was scared. And in that fear, Ronan felt his own heart tremble. He tried to sleep but couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he imagined scavenger gangs or alien hunters finding them. This creature, innocent and small, was worth more than gold, or even life itself. And yet, he had no idea how he could protect it. His workshop was just metal and scraps. It was vulnerable. And the desert beyond? Merciless. As dawn crept over the horizon, painting the dunes in pale gold, the hatchling finally calmed enough to curl against his chest. Ronan allowed himself a small, exhausted smile. "We'll figure this out," he whispered, though he didn't know how. The desert was vast, the city authorities were ruthless, and this hatchling was something the world might not forgive him for harboring. And then, as the first rays hit the workshop window, a sharp, piercing screech echoed from outside, different from the hatchling. Larger, more deliberate. Ronan froze. The hatchling stiffened, wings flaring instinctively. Something was coming. Something big. And whatever it was, it wasn't friendly. Ronan's hands went to his tools, his mind racing. He had saved the hatchling from the storm, but the desert had more challenges than he could count. And now the real test was about to begin. The desert outside Ronan's workshop stretched endlessly, a sea of shifting dunes that hid dangers at every turn. He had hoped the storm was the worst of it. He was wrong. By mid-morning the wind had settled, but the temperature had risen, baking the sand into a furnace. Pyra, the hatchling, stirred restlessly, testing the sling Ronan had fashioned for her broken wing. Sparks hissed as her scales brushed against metal. She looked at him with wide, searching eyes, and he felt a deep pang. She depended on him completely, yet he knew he could barely keep her alive. Food was running low, water was scarce, and scavenger gangs prowled the outskirts of Virilia. Ronan had to act fast. He tore through his supply crates, salvaging every usable component. Old drones, half-dismantled hover engines, and cracked solar cells became tools and weapons. He repaired the drones enough to hover, then rigged them to deliver water and small nutrient packs to Pyra without her needing to move too much. The hatchling watched cautiously at first, then accepted the food, her sharp claws barely grazing his hands. Each moment of her trust felt like a victory. But survival was never simple. Midway through the day, a set of distant hums cut through the desert stillness. Ronan froze. It was too patterned, too mechanical. Scavenger drones. The gangs had found him, or at least they were scouting. He motioned for Pyra to stay low, hiding her beneath a tarp, though she wriggled, hissing softly. Her instinct was to fight or flee, not hide. Ronan had no weapons that could directly match the drones. Instead, he improvised. He grabbed old scrap metal, wires, and spare energy cells, setting up a series of traps around the workshop. A magnetic pulse could knock out the drone systems temporarily. Another line of small explosive charges could disable their sensors. He didn't know if it would be enough. It had to be. The first drone appeared over the ridge. Ronan held his breath, checking each line, each trigger. His hands shook, not from fear but from adrenaline. Pyra made a small, involuntary cry and he whispered, "Quiet, trust me." The drone hovered closer, its sensors scanning, and Ronan triggered the first pulse. The drone wobbled violently, sparks flying before crashing into the sand. Pyra chirped, almost in relief. More drones followed. Each time Ronan adapted. He used Pyra's energy, her bioelectric sparks from the wing injury, to short-circuit parts of their circuits, combining her instinctive defense with his clever engineering. The creatures of the desert would have seen it as impossible. A single human, battered and tired, defending against a swarm of machines with nothing but ingenuity and a small alien companion. But it worked barely. By evening the drones were gone. Ronan slumped against the wall, sweat and sand caking his skin. Pyra curled against his chest, exhausted. He looked at her and felt a strange mix of pride and dread. She was alive, yes, but only barely. And tomorrow the desert would bring more dangers. Hunger, exposure, and now likely alien hunters. As he patched her wing again, he realized the extent of what he had gotten into. This hatchling was not ordinary. Its biology was unlike anything he had seen. Sparks from her scales interacted with metal in strange ways, and she responded to machines as if she could understand them. He tried a small experiment, touching a dormant drone, and Pyra's glow intensified. The drone shivered and whirred back to life, moving slowly. She had instinctive control over machinery. Ronan stared at her, awe and concern mixing. This was incredible, but dangerous. If the wrong eyes saw her abilities, they would come not to negotiate, but to claim or destroy. And he had no army, no allies. Only his mind, his hands, and his determination to protect her. Night fell over the desert. The workshop glowed dimly with scattered lamps, casting long shadows. Ronan sat by Pyra, feeding her nutrient gel by hand. She looked up at him, her small body trembling, and he realized he had come to care more than he thought possible. Every breath she took, every small spark of energy from her wing, reminded him that he was not powerless. He had saved her once, but could he keep saving her day after day as dangers multiplied? Then came the sound that froze him to the core. A low, mechanical hum, different from the scavenger drones, deep and deliberate, echoing across the dunes. Pyra stiffened, wings flaring instinctively. She hissed, a warning Ronan could feel in his chest. His stomach tightened. These were no scavengers. They were hunters, high-tech, methodical, and dangerous. And they were closing in. Ronan's mind raced. He had defended against machines before, survived storms, even navigated the desert alone. But this was different. These hunters were looking for Pyra. Whatever they wanted, it would not involve negotiation. His choices were limited and every second counted. He looked down at the hatchling curled in his arms. Her eyes, wide and trusting, met his. He swallowed, steadying his trembling hands. "We'll survive this," he whispered. "I don't care how impossible it looks." Outside, the hum grew louder, and the sand shifted with a force that seemed almost alive. The desert was no longer just a backdrop. It was a battlefield. And Ronan knew, with a sinking certainty, that tomorrow would push both human and hatchling beyond everything they had faced so far. Ronan crouched behind a collapsed metal beam, peering through the sand-filtered moonlight. The hum of the alien hunters grew louder. Sleek, black hoversuits glided over the dunes, each rider scanning the desert with cold, glowing optics. He counted 6. They were fast, organized, and armed with weapons designed to immobilize or kill instantly. He swallowed hard. There was no way he could fight them head-on. Not with Pyra's wings still weak, not with his jury-rigged defenses. He would need to think fast. He scanned his workshop, running calculations in his mind. Old drones, scrap metal, magnetic coils, power cells. If he could combine them creatively, maybe he could create a diversion long enough to escape. But the desert offered no margin for error. Every misstep could mean Pyra's death, and he couldn't allow that. Not after everything. Ronan picked up a small, half-functioning drone and tossed it toward a pile of scrap outside. It flared to life with a buzz. He adjusted the rudimentary controls with trembling fingers, programming it to hover near the hunter's path. He did the same with 3 more drones, setting them to mimic movement patterns that suggested a creature larger than Pyra. The alien sensors would detect heat signatures, motion, and energy readings. If he timed it right, they would attack the decoys instead of him and the hatchling. Pyra shifted in her sling, her body glowing faintly. Ronan froze. Sparks danced along her scales, subtle at first, then stronger. She raised a claw toward the dormant drones. The sparks leapt and one of the drones shuddered, lights flickering back to life. She was controlling it. Not consciously, he realized, but instinctively. Her biology was interfacing with electronics. Machines responded to her presence like a magnet. A plan formed in Ronan's mind. He couldn't just hide. He had to use Pyra. Together they could fight in ways no human, or no alien, would expect. He whispered to her softly, "Trust me. I need you to do what comes naturally." Her glowing eyes met his and she chirped faintly, almost like acknowledgement. The hunters were closing in. Ronan activated the first decoy drone. It hovered into view, lights flickering. One of the hunters raised a plasma lance. Sparks erupted, the drone wobbled, and a second drone took off, moving unpredictably. Ronan ducked behind the workshop wall, heart hammering. Pyra let out a high-pitched cry, wings flickering. Sparks danced from her scales, connecting with the drones. Each machine sprang to life, moving like a small swarm of defenders. The hunters paused, confusion flashing across their helmets. Their sensors were being tricked. Drones moved where there was nothing, and wherever Pyra's sparks touched, metal shuddered and malfunctioned. One hunter fired a net pulse, but the drone intercepted it, short-circuiting the attack. The desert erupted in chaos. Ronan's mind raced. He used the workshop's wiring to create more triggers. Small explosions, magnetic pulses, and falling metal beams combined with Pyra's energy pulses to form a gauntlet. The hunters were forced to split, trying to track multiple targets. It was working, but only just. The desert storm kicked up again, sand whipping around, reducing visibility. Ronan's body ached, but his hands worked on, setting one last trap, a line of energy cells linked to a large scrap pile. If the hunters got too close, it would trigger a blast strong enough to knock them from their hover suits. One hunter had spotted Pyra. Ronan's stomach dropped. The creature's small body was glowing, sparks arcing dangerously. The hunter raised his lance. Instinctively, Ronan triggered the final trap. The energy cells exploded, creating a temporary shield of metal and fire between them. Pyra leapt, wings weak but powerful enough to carry her through the blast, and landed in his arms. He ducked, shielding her as the debris scattered around them. For a moment, silence. The hunters recalculated, scanning for their prey, but the swarm of drones and Pyra's strange influence on the machines had confused them. They couldn't tell what was real and what was a trick. Ronan took a deep breath, clutching the hatchling tightly. He realized with a surge of pride and fear that they had survived using nothing but brains, courage, and a bond that transcended species. The desert was quiet again. The hunters had retreated, for now. But Ronan knew this was not the end. Pyra rested against his chest, exhausted, and he could feel her small heartbeat. He looked at her, a mixture of relief and awe washing over him. She was incredible. More than incredible. And together they were a force the galaxy had not anticipated, human ingenuity and alien life working as one. But Ronan also knew the real challenge was still ahead. They could not stay in the open desert. The hunters would regroup, bringing better equipment, more precision, more deadly force. He had no army, no reinforcements, only the tools he could improvise and Pyra's unique abilities. And yet he felt something stronger than fear. Determination. He whispered softly to her, "Tomorrow we go further. We survive. We outsmart them. No one will take you from me." Pyra chirped, almost like agreement, her glow dimming as exhaustion overcame her. Ronan stared at the horizon, where the first faint light of dawn touched the dunes. He had saved her once. He would have to do it again. And next time the stakes would be higher. Somewhere beyond the dunes, unseen and calculating, the hunters prepared for the next strike. And Ronan, with nothing but his mind, his hands and Pyra in his arms, knew the desert had just become a battlefield, and he was ready to fight in ways no one expected. Ronan's eyes scanned the horizon as the sun dipped behind jagged dunes. Tarki Station, a ruined launch pad long abandoned, rose like a skeleton from the sand. Its rusted catwalks and broken gantries promised shelter, but also danger. He had studied the old schematics, memorized every access shaft, and planned every possible escape route. Pyra, still weak but alert, clung to his shoulder, wings twitching nervously. "Stay close," he whispered, adjusting the sling. "We'll make it through this. I promise." The desert was quiet, but the quiet was false. Somewhere beyond the dunes, the alien hunters were regrouping, preparing for a strike that would leave no margin for error. Ronan knew their sensors were more advanced than he could imagine. They could detect life signs, bioelectric fields, even minor disturbances in the desert sand. He had no armor, no army, only ingenuity and Pyra's unique abilities. And yet he would fight. That was all he had ever known. They reached the launch pad as shadows stretched long over rusted metal. The station groaned under the weight of time and sand. Ronan slipped inside, Pyra nestled against his chest, careful not to disturb her wounded wing. Every step was measured, each footfall echoing in the hollow corridors. He set up traps, falling beams, pressure-triggered sparks, and a makeshift alarm system using old sensors scavenged from the station. Each was designed to slow, confuse, or disable the hunters. The first signal came as a low hum through the sand outside. Ronan stiffened. Then, a flash of light, plasma lances slicing the air, and the hunters descended, coordinated, precise. They moved like predators, anticipating every possible escape. Ronan ducked behind a collapsed gantry, heart hammering. Pyra whimpered, sensing the danger. He pressed a finger to her chest. "Not yet. Trust me." He triggered the first trap. A weight shifted, sending a metal beam swinging across a corridor. A hunter was caught off balance, his hoversuit sparking as it slammed into the station wall. Pyra's eyes glowed. Sparks leapt from her scales, connecting with the exposed wires of a dormant drone. It whirred to life, moving with surprising coordination. Ronan's jaw clenched. They could fight, not with brute force but with precision, strategy, and speed. The hunters adjusted immediately, splitting into pairs, searching for the hatchling. Ronan set off a second trap, a cascade of magnetic pulses frying their sensors momentarily. Pyra reacted instinctively, leaping toward the nearest drone and emitting a controlled bioelectric pulse that short-circuited its systems. The combination of human planning and alien instinct was chaotic and brilliant. The hunters were clever, but Ronan's improvisation and Pyra's abilities were unpredictable. One hunter managed to corner Pyra near the edge of the catwalk. Ronan's stomach dropped. The hatchling's small body glowed fiercely, sparks flying from her wings. Without hesitation he grabbed a nearby kinetic railgun, a prototype left from Tarki Station's last operational days, and fired. The shot didn't hit the hunter directly but sent a massive scrap crate crashing between them, forcing the hunter back. Pyra flapped weakly, gaining altitude. Ronan's hands were shaking but his mind was clear. Every action had to count. The battle raged across the station. Sparks, dust, and sand mixed with the glowing plasma of alien weaponry. Ronan used every scrap of knowledge, every fragment of experience, to outthink his enemies. He rigged old gantries to collapse on command, rerouted power to create sudden electromagnetic pulses, and synchronized Pyra's bioelectric pulses with the machinery. Every move required split-second timing. Mistakes were fatal. A hunter fired a net pulse directly at Pyra. She screeched, hurling herself forward. Ronan lunged, catching her midair, shielding her body with his own. The net hit him instead, embedding in his jacket and sending a jolt through his body. Pain seared his arm, but he held on to her. He had faced storms, hunger, and isolation, but he would not let her die. Not after everything. As the dust settled for a brief moment, Ronan's traps had claimed 2 hunters. The remaining 4 hesitated, confused by the swarm of drones and erratic movements Pyra caused. Ronan caught his breath, checking Pyra's wings. They were weak but functional. They had survived the initial assault, but the fight was far from over. He glanced at the horizon. The desert was dark, but the stars were coming out, reflecting off the sand like tiny fires. Ronan realized with a surge of fierce pride that this was exactly what humans were meant to do. Adapt, innovate, fight against impossible odds and protect those who could not protect themselves. Pyra's life was in his hands, and he had refused to fail. The hunters regrouped, scanning for signs of their prey. Ronan knew they would come again with more force, more precision, more deadly intent. But he also knew this. Human courage, combined with creativity and determination, was something no algorithm, no weapon, no alien army could fully anticipate. He had turned Tarki's station, a ruined relic, into a battleground where brains, heart, and courage outweighed raw firepower. He hugged Pyra close. "We're not done yet," he whispered. "But we survive. Together." Her tiny body twitched against his, eyes glowing softly, a mixture of exhaustion and trust. For the first time in days he felt a flicker of hope. Outside, the desert wind howled. Somewhere beyond the dunes, the hunters would be planning their next strike. Inside the station, Ronan and Pyra prepared for the fight to come. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running low on supplies, but neither of them would give up. Not now, not ever. The desert night was alive with possibility and danger. Ronan knew the final test was coming, one that would demand everything from him. Skill, courage, and the unbreakable bond he shared with the hatchling. And tomorrow he promised himself they would face it together. The first light of dawn painted the desert in gold and orange. Tarki's station lay quiet, scarred by the night's chaos. Ronan Cade leaned against a twisted metal beam, exhaustion pressing into every muscle, yet he could not rest. Pyra, the hatchling he had fought to protect, stirred weakly in his arms. Her scales glimmered faintly, catching the early light like fire in miniature. They were alive. Against impossible odds, alien hunters, harsh deserts, and near-deadly machinery, they had survived. But survival was only the beginning. Ronan knew the hunters would return, stronger, smarter, relentless. He had to plan, prepare, and act. Yet for the first time in weeks he allowed himself a moment to breathe, to feel something other than fear. He placed Pyra gently on a pile of soft rags. She looked up at him, blinking, her small body trembling. He studied her wing, now bent but healing. Her eyes met his, and in them he saw trust, intelligence, and a spark of something more, potential. He had saved her life, but it was clear she would save his too, in ways he did not yet understand. Ronan moved through the ruined station with purpose, collecting parts and improvising. The desert was empty for now, but he had learned that cleverness was a human weapon as strong as any plasma lance. He rigged alarms and fallback defenses, repurposed old drones, and even created small, mobile shelters from broken hulls and scaffolding. Every device was designed for one thing: to protect Pyra and give them both a chance if the hunters came again. As he worked, he remembered the night sky over Virilia, the endless sands, the isolation that had once felt like a cage. Now it felt like a proving ground. He had been alone, defeated by circumstances and misfortune, yet he had risen, not because the world had given him aid, but because he had refused to surrender. Every calculated risk, every improvised trap, every moment of courage had brought them here. Pyra chirped softly and fluttered toward a drone that had been dormant until now. Sparks danced from her scales as she nudged it to life. Ronan watched, heart swelling. Together they had discovered something extraordinary. The combination of human intellect and alien biology could change outcomes no one else could imagine. He had learned to trust not just himself, but the instincts of a creature the universe seemed to have abandoned. Then he saw it, a distant glint on the horizon. Dust swirled unnaturally. He tensed. The alien hunters. They had returned, no doubt, scouting for traces, measuring the desert for any sign of their quarry. Ronan's stomach tightened, but he did not panic. He had survived worse. He had learned, adapted, and innovated. And he was not alone. He moved quickly, setting a series of decoys to mislead the hunters. Small drones, sparks from Pyra's bioelectric abilities, and carefully placed reflective metal sheets created illusions of movement. When the hunters approached, they found empty corridors, false shadows, and malfunctioning equipment. Frustration must have burned in their helmets. Ronan smiled grimly. Humans could fight with brains, not just weapons. They had done it before and they could do it again. Hours passed. The hunters left, or at least retreated far enough to give him breathing space. Ronan and Pyra rested briefly. He sat against a rusted wall, holding her close, feeling her tiny heartbeat in rhythm with his own. He thought of everything that had brought him here: failure, isolation, the fear of being forgotten, and now triumph, trust, and an unbreakable bond. "You're safe, for now," he whispered. But we're going further, aren't we? We can't stay here forever. Pyra chirped softly, nudging his cheek. He laughed, a sound he had not made in weeks. The desert was harsh, unforgiving, and full of dangers, but together they were stronger than any odds. He began sketching plans in the dust, outlining routes through the dunes, safe zones, and fallback points. Pyra watched him, her wings twitching with energy she was slowly reclaiming. Every idea, every calculation, every improvised gadget was a testament to human determination. He had turned a ruined workshop and an abandoned launch pad into a fortress of hope. By midday the heat was oppressive, but Ronan felt alive in a way he had not in years. He had learned to survive, yes, but he had also learned to fight for something greater than himself. Pyra was more than a hatchling. She was a companion, a partner, and a reminder that courage could take root in even the loneliest places. As the sun began to lower, casting long shadows over the dunes, Ronan climbed to the highest part of the station. From there, he looked across the desert, the city of Virelia far in the distance, and the endless sands beyond. He saw danger, yes, but also possibility. He had faced impossibility and survived. He had learned that human ingenuity, courage, and heart could prevail where machines, predators, and alien hunters failed. Pyra flapped her wings experimentally, then landed on his shoulder. Ronan reached up, resting a hand against her small, warm body. He whispered, "We did it, and we'll keep doing it, no matter what comes next." She chirped, sparks dancing faintly along her scales, and for the first time Ronan believed it. Together they would continue. Together they had changed the rules. The desert had tested them, the hunters had challenged them, and the odds had tried to crush them. But Ronan and Pyra had endured. They were alive, resourceful, and unstoppable. The desert wind carried a quiet promise. Survival was only the first step. With courage, intelligence, and heart, humans could not just endure, they could triumph. Ronan looked at Pyra and smiled, a deep, steady smile. They had faced the impossible and they had won. And for the first time in his life, he knew the impossible was never truly impossible. Not for humans. Not for him. Not for Pyra.